Managing the research process. So when we talk about research process, we talk about decisions that have to be made, things that have to be clarified. And it's very, very, very important to do this properly, because if you don't do this properly, you cannot draw any insights from the research after. First is and very important, what are the objectives of the study? What are the objectives? So this means a visitor study is not something valuable in itself. It becomes only important if the study addresses the right questions. So the first step when you start a survey is think about the goal and the objectives of the study. This very often means first, what is the problem we want to solve in our institution? What should we know to solve this problem? A visitor study is just a tool that delivers information to you. If you do not ask questions before, the research after does not speak to you. It's very important first to clarify exactly what you want to know. What is your problems? And this as precise as possible. Not only how can I get more visitors, but be more specific. Think in terms of visitors, in terms of program selection, marketing activities, media campaigning, whatever. So you have to formulate goals and you also have to limit them. Don't take everything where you think this is a problem in one survey. This won't work. So what should be clarified? What is the problem to be solved? What should we know that we can solve this problem later? What are then the objectives of the studies? What information do I want to have afterwards, after having conducted the study, to work with this information from the study to solve my problem? What is the focus of the investigation? You have to concentrate on some issues. This may be visitor structure, how the visitors behave in your institution, for instance, in your museum. What do they see? What do they do not look at? What is the selection of the program? For instance, a movie selection or music selection. Or maybe also in talking about special exhibitions, what could be possibly themes. Also, what are the visitor needs? What does the visitor want? Very often the needs of the visitors are so simple, much more simple than you imagine. What is the service? So satisfaction with the service. The service contributes a lot to visitor satisfaction. It's not only the content, it's also the service. It's at least 50% that contributes to the customer satisfaction, which is done by information and cloakroom and possibilities to rest and catering service and restaurants and things like that. So usually you have to concentrate on 2 or 3 maximum aspects I mentioned here. For instance, I give you an example. How do I arrive at my research questions? How can I develop a research question? For instance, we currently have a great selection of movies. Have we had more first-time visitors as a result? Is visitor satisfaction with the current program better than last year? Our visitors become constantly older. What is the reason for that? We have strengthened the service staff, improved ticketing service, upgraded the gastronomy. Is this reflected in visitor satisfaction? We spend a lot of time on advertising and PR without knowing exactly whether it is going into the right channels. Should we better go to other media, and which ones? We want to justify the need for more financial resources to political committees and stakeholders. How is this possible? Unfortunately, the ticket prices had to be increased recently. Is a different audience coming now? We want to give proof for our private sponsors that their activities have an impact. How can we do this? Just a few examples. So, this is an overview of developing a research concept. I show you here, and it is very recommendable to follow this chain of activities that are displayed here. As I mentioned, the very first step is always, what are your problems? What do you want to solve? Very often you feel something is wrong, and you cannot specify it, but at least you have to name it and say, well, there are some areas we have to know, we can do better. For example, audience descriptions. We really do not know who is coming to us and how the people like our offer, and not only the people but different subgroups. Younger visitors, do they judge differently from the older ones? It's about improving promotion, program work, and so on. Then next step is formulate your objectives. When you have a problem, then what is your aim to solve this problem? For instance, we need new audiences. Non-visitors, for instance. Or we have to optimize our communication to target certain groups more precisely. We need more turnover from ticketing. Or we see that when we are doing events, that every time our audience changes dramatically, we have very, very few loyal visitors. And we need to have more loyal visitors, because this makes work much easier. So then the objective. Then there is, you have to decide for a certain research design. A research design means not just developing a questionnaire, but how do I proceed to this altogether? For instance, do I want to make a representative audience study? Or may I do other things? For instance, do some qualitative studies, focus studies, or just guided interviews with some visitors, and to interview them personally, in depth, for 1 hour or longer, which does not take many resources, and it can be very useful. Or do I want to do my data collection by visitor questions, or do I want to set a questionnaire on my website or the Instagram account or whatever? So you have to decide how you want to proceed. Then there is the development and selection of the data acquisition. So how can I do the sampling? How can I create a representative sample? that allows me to draw conclusions. What questions do I want to formulate? This is the point here where the questionnaire comes into play. This is the point where you develop your questions in the questionnaire. And then next step is develop a plan for later analysis. This just means first here, no, I cannot, no, you don't see it. Okay, anyway, when you're formulating your objectives of the study, you have to transfer these objectives into questions of a questionnaire. For instance, you can do this making a table. On the left column, you have your objectives, what you want to get to know from the study, and on the right side, on the right column, you formulate the questions that belong to your research interest at this point. For instance, you want to learn from the study, how can I improve my media campaign activities? So then you formulate some questions to this. You make the table. Left side there is the research question. On the right side there are all the questions that belong to this issue. And in the same manner you do this for all the research questions you have. This is a very important step because this helps you to see in advance whether all issues are covered by the appropriate questions. For instance, if you do not make a plan like this, it very often happens that after the study, people say, oh, we forgot to ask some important question. How could we do this? But then it's too late. The study is done and it's the results are there and you cannot change. So this is a problem. To avoid this problem, just thoroughly think first. When I develop my questionnaire, for every question or every problem I want to have solved, do I have the proper questions? And also, can also think then, how do I analyze these questions afterwards? Because, as I mentioned before, if you do not put questions to your research study, it does not give you any answer afterwards. Just collecting questions, looking at the questionnaire, afterwards looking at a table, at an Excel spreadsheet, in most cases doesn't tell you a lot. You just sit there and yet, okay, what can I do with these figures now? So it's the job before first ask questions, develop the appropriate research questions, develop the appropriate questionnaire questions. I bring this together. Then you make the data procurement, you do your field work, collect the interviews, and then you do the data analysis. And the data analysis means you interpret your results, you're building tables, you are combining different variables. We can later talk about this, how to do this. And when you do this analysis, you close the loop. You go back to your initial research questions. You look at the data you have and you do the analysis with the questions in mind you had at the beginning of the study. This may really help you making sense from the data. Question? Remarks? Okay.